And then this slide is just to communicate that we often feel like we're herding cats. Like takes a lot of effort because we're trying to tap into your hearts and minds and all that kind of thing. So the more that we can work together well, that's the goal. So now we're going to talk about the tools a little more depth for each one of those ones on that one page. And Judy's going to start with the tree protection, and then I'm going to talk about a couple, and we'll just go on from there. All right, so the next tool in that guide on that page is talking about soil, topsoil conservation. It's certainly not your typical charismatic megafauna, which is a term used in the ENGO sector to like find those really cute animals that get people caring about nature. But soil is alive, it does have value. It's a very important rainwater management asset when seen as a whole on that landscape scale. So one person's yard may not seem like much matters what happens to their soil, but when we look at all the yards adding up, and that's the watershed plan, it's very critically valuable. So I'm going to talk about this tool in the toolbox. It's not a specific tool that we have in any one jurisdiction, or even all the jurisdictions, but rather a recognition that that soil plays an important rainwater management function. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And that there's unique opportunities and challenges in applying tools around topsoil protection. We each have different regulations regarding topsoil conservation, and the staff who work on these items more specifically in your organization will be able to explain that to an applicant. So again, I just really want to make sure that people realize that coming out of this today with the guide, that anybody who isn't already super familiar with this is not meant to be the expert on this topic from a 2-hour workshop, but that you can speak to it broadly and you know who in your department does know more about the requirements on any one given tool. So, and I just wanted to say too that as an aside, these 3 tools, the tree protection, the water balance model expressed when Glenn and Chris start talking about that, and the topsoil, really assist with that majority of rainfall events which are of the lower intensity. So it's important that we make clear that these approaches do not necessarily entirely replace traditional pipe and convey systems of rainwater management, but that they complement and help alleviate pressure on these traditional systems by retaining more water on site. So let's not all think we're throwing the pipe out the window. That's not happening either. So this slide shows how much water is retained. It's a little bit grainy, but how much water is retained and how much runs off between a natural environment and an urbanized one. So in a natural environment, about 15% is running off, and then in an urbanized environment, 55 to 70 is running off, which of course is then what creates more flashy systems, causes erosion, a surge of pollutants into the environment. There's no time to infiltrate there. And gardeners, foresters, and farmers they know that soil is very important. They've been telling us that for a long time. So topsoil is especially important. It is the layer of soil closest to the surface, exposed to air and rain. It's composed of organic matter and minerals, home to beneficial organisms that recycle nutrients. It's the spaces between soil hold air and water, and soils can typically store up to 50% of their volume as water before becoming saturated. So those are healthy soils with a lot of organic matter in them, but they can basically be sponges. They're good for plants, so they provide faster establishment, higher survival rates, reduced need for weeding and pest control and irrigation, which, you know, there wasn't a jurisdiction around here who didn't have to talk about reduced irrigation this year. There's a very public awareness around that. And rainwater, they provide rainwater source control. They reduce runoff by that storing. So I just wanted to recognize that there's these kind of like jingles or catchy kind of phrases that are starting to emerge. Here's from the Okanagan example, Homeowner's Guide to Using Rain as a Resource, and the slow it, spread it, sink it mantra. So through infiltration, percolation into those deeper layers of the soil, even hard pan, I've heard, can percolate, and storage. So healthy intact soils serve this sponge function, which does slow, spread, and sink rainwater. And then there are different tools that can help with this. The Water Balance Model Express is certainly going to talk more about that. And of course, engineers can look at how to achieve different goals for each infiltration, percolation, and storage for a particular site. And yeah, it's just nice that we're not alone in sharing this message. I just love looking at other people's resources and ripping stuff off that might be beneficial. So this one's actually it's a book, and it's got tons of examples what to do about your rain gutters and decks and all kinds of things. It's very visual, so I really recommend it. There's also this other resource, just to let you guys know, Topsoil Bylaws toolkit. It just tells us the regulatory options that are out there should we get more regulatory. So what regulations and practices can and do we put in place to protect and require topsoil? Well, we can have it enshrined better in our strategic policy. So actually I find that our current strategic policy certainly recognizes the rainwater management piece, but it doesn't drill down or expressly talk about the soils themselves, the soil health. It can, but never. So that might be an opportunity to make that provision a little stronger. We can require more information on soils prior to development approval. That is absolutely one thing we can definitely do, and some of us may be doing. So again, depends on our jurisdiction. We can require topsoil performance targets. So as well as retention for existing topsoil, but in many cases we may actually need to put more topsoil on there to achieve strong rainwater goals. And then of course, I always just have to acknowledge that in all this regulatory piece, the enforcement piece it's a piece that we continue to need to work on. So it's just a reality I think we're probably all aware of.
You can't enforce what you're not monitoring.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking that, Jack, is that the enforcement absolutely links to the monitoring piece. So even, I think sometimes it's easy to write a permit, let's say me at a planning stage, usually an earlier stage in a development process, write a permit and then you kind of lose track of it. So we're trying to build in more of the monitoring, but it does take effort, and ideally, if there's more people who are, through their day-to-day, doing their local government work, who are aware of some, in a general sense, some of the things that look right and look wrong on a site, that they might have a little bit more awareness to help their enforcement colleagues in actually enforcing. So I'm going to also talk then about the erosion control tool a bit. It's kind of, I think of it as like the ugly twin sister to soil conservation. It's what happens when we inappropriately manage our soils and rainwater. It can turn that resource, that beautiful topsoil that provides all those functions, into an erosion and sediment control problem, which of course the surge, can create a surge of pollutants. We've certainly all kind of seen this bare earth erosion thing when heavy rains happen, like right now. It can have effects on aquatic life. It can affect even our access to environments, the beach, landslides. So I just wanted to do a little bit of just a little high-level erosion and sediment 101 so that we can talk consistently about it at the front counter in a really general sense. So just to be clear, that erosion pertains to the physical removal or detachment of soil particles followed by their transfer to another location by the action of a mobile agent such as wind, water, or a vehicle. So it's a source and a process that we're aiming to control. So erosion control is source control. And sediment control pertains to soil. So sediment are soil particles detached and mobilized by erosion. So this is the actual substance that we're aiming to control. So it's not the source, it's the substance itself. And so it's really important to recognize that actually erosion control is the biggest bang for your buck for a person who's doing their work. That if they can prevent the particles from moving, then they're way ahead of the game. Because once those particles start moving, they get into a water column. Even if you have settling ponds, particularly clays and things, they can just take forever to settle out. So erosion control is the goal. So I think it's just helpful if we have that own distinction in when we're acknowledging it. So here's just a little image of that. We want to stop the detachment from even occurring. And where that's not possible, we want to at least limit and channelize the transport and then promote the deposition and settling of those sediments. So common erosion agents, just wind, water, construction equipment, and then factors that contribute to erosion are soil texture, soil cover and permeability, topography, the velocity and soil volume. So again, one of the things about soil texture that we really want to remember is that the more texture that there is in the soil, sometimes they kind of talk about like fluffing it up or excavation and just as opposed to these really smooth surfaces, that can actually help a ton with just absorbing water.
Can I add a couple more agents to that?
Yeah.
I used to work in BC Parks as well. So
yeah.
a couple of major or dirt bikes, quads, mountain bikes, and rock climbers.
Right.
They are also a big contributor to degradation in the backcountry areas.
Degradation and
And
invasive
hikers too.
and invasive species
Or
spread would also pop into my head then too. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. No, that's great. So this slide is only just to let you know that there are guidebooks out there that talk about all the different tools for, let's in this case say erosion control. There's guidebooks for sediment control. Just letting you know that it exists, just so that if someone's at front counter, you know, we know that there are tools out there. So what regulations and practices can we put in place to avoid erosion and sedimentation? We can certainly start require, and I'd say at the City of Courtenay we're actually pretty good at requiring erosion control for larger scale projects. However, the monitoring is the really important piece. So there's different ways that we can make those requirements have a little more teeth. We can have standalone bylaws. The city was actually very close to having that, and for many reasons didn't quite get there. But and then we can have it as other parts of regulations and permits, and that's actually where the city is putting their erosion control pieces, is into other regulations and permits. And then we can aim for departmental and jurisdiction consistency. So for, like, I'm just speaking from the City of Courtenay, planning department and the engineering department may actually have slightly different tools at their disposal to affect the same thing, and yet wouldn't it be nice if we were really speaking the same language, because the applicant doesn't care which department they're dealing with, they just want to be told something really consistent. And then of course I just like to acknowledge that enforcement's the ongoing piece, monitoring and enforcement. So that's it for me, and back to Judy on rain gardens. She's going to talk about quickly.